Hi everyone, it's Shannon here. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, we are going to create this gorgeous card featuring the Tall Pines Layering Stencils. I'll demonstrate how to do these ombre trees and then add details with copic markers. Let's start out by taking a look at the Tall Pines Layering Stencil set. There are 4 stencils in this set, and each one of the stencils are labeled. I do think it's a little bit easier to line up if you start with stencil 1 and work your way down through each stencil. I'm going to ink blend over an A2 panel of white cardstock. I do have a grip mat behind my cardstock to kind of hold my stencil in place while I ink blend. Once I get that stencil kind of centered over my panel, I then am going to grab my ink. I'm going to use Distress inks today because I like how vibrant they are, but you can definitely use oxides if you prefer. The first color I'm using is Rustic Wilderness, and we're just going to ink blend a simple gradation over each one of these trees, keeping it kind of darker at the base of the tree. That will add more interest and more depth to our background. It's very simple to do and just adds a lot. Once I finish ink blending with Rustic Wilderness, we'll remove our stencil, and then we'll be ready for stencil number 2. There's parts of this stencil number 2 that line up with some of the trees that you've already ink blended, so just watch for those areas where the edge of the tree kind of lines up with the stencil. Line it up, and then you'll be ready for your next color. In my case, I'm using MOWED Lawn, another green. I'm going to kind of stick with a green palette today, keeping it kind of traditional. But I do think it would be fun to use some untraditional colors with these stencils as well, possibly even maybe fall colors, even though they're pine trees and they wouldn't have fall leaves. But I still think it would be really pretty to see it in some warm tones as well. Once I finish with that MOWED Lawn, we're on to stencil number 3. Again, look for the areas where the stencil lines up with some of the trees you've already ink blended, and then and the more you do, the easier and easier it gets to line up these stencils. For this stencil, I've moved on to peeled paint, kind of an olivey green, and you can see already how this this background is really starting to come together with that third color of trees here. Once I finish with peeled paint, I'll remove that stencil, and we have just one more stencil to go, the last stencil here. Again, going to line this up. This one's pretty easy because it's the last one, and it's just going to line up to all those white openings. And for our final color, I'm going to use Pine Needles Distress ink and quickly ink blend another gradation over each one of these trees. I just love this stencil overall. I think it creates such a gorgeous background, perfect for more of a simplistic kind of graphic card, and definitely gives you much more of a masculine feel, which is great because those cards can be kind of tricky to create. So now we're ready for the details. I have a copic marker here. This is G28, and I'm going to color details on all the trees that I ink blended in Pine Needles, which is the color I just finished ink blending with stencil number 4. And what I'm doing with my copic is I'm creating kind of these wiggly or zigzaggy horizontal lines over the tree. Sometimes they're a little bit more V-like, but this is going to replicate those shadows that you see on these trees because of the branches, kind of where you're looking at the tree and you're kind of seeing deeper into the tree, and that would be more shadowed. This is really easy to do, and it really does create a little bit more realistic look, but definitely adding some gorgeous texture, which is what I really like. I really love the texture element that this adds. So now that I've finished with Pine Needles, we're going to move on to a different copic marker. So I have a different copic marker picked out for each one of my Distress inks. This is YG67, and I'm using it on all the MOWED Lawn trees here that I ink blended with stencil number 2. So here I am just working my way through it, doing the exact same kind of marks, the zigzaggy kind of wiggly horizontal marks to kind of create replicate that look of shadows. Now we're moving on to our next marker, which is G85. We're going to use this to color our peeled paint trees, and you can already start to see, now it's starting to come together. It looked a little doubtful before, I admit, but once you start to get through all of the trees and they all get this little shadowed effect, then it really starts to come together. So here's our last one. This is G99, and we're doing all the trees that we ink blended in Rustic Wilderness. And once we finish with these trees, I think that'll really complete the final look. And this just adds, that copic marker adds just this gorgeous texture, and I think it's just a fun way to get kind of a new look with those pine trees stencils. So now we're going to move on to our sentiment. I grabbed a sentiment from the Big Time Kindness stamp set, stamped it in intense black ink from Honeybee Stamps onto white cardstock. Now I'm going to use the Big Time Kindness coordinating dies to die cut that sentiment out. Love how that looks. It's so gorgeous. I love the little negative spaces between the words. It just makes it such a perfect sentiment. Then I'm going to move on to this mini messages sentiment set. I'm going to use a sentiment from this set to kind of create like a sub-sentiment. So this card kind of has like a birthday card theme. I stamped it in clear embossing and watermarking from Honeybee Stamps, dipped it into some white embossing powder, and then I heat set with my heat tool. Then I'm going to use the mini message banners dies and die cut this sentiment out. I'm using the kind of straight one, and I did trim the sides a little bit so it's a little bit tighter, and then add some foam adhesive strips to both the right and left side for a little dimension. I've also added foam adhesive to the back side of our Oh Happy Day sentiment as well. We're going to finish up this card by first adding liquid adhesive to the back side of our Pine Trees A2 panel and just glue it onto an A2 top folding white card base. I could have totally done that ink blended background on the card front as well, but I didn't think of that while I was creating the card. Now I'm going to I removed the backing on my Oh Happy Day sentiment, and now I'm just going to center and place it on the card front, remove the backing on that foam adhesive on the sub sentiment, and then just place it over the Oh Happy Day little bottom part of the sentiment, and that will actually complete my card. I'll hold it to the camera here so you can get a good look at this really beautiful kind of clean and simple card. I mean, it's basically a background with a sentiment, but I just love how it turned out. I love the colors of the trees, and I love that additional texture that we get from the Copic markers. And I think this Tall Pines stencil set is so cool. I cannot wait to kind of try something similar with maybe a white gel pen or snow pen to kind of add snow to the trees as well. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.